Again, thank you for being here, both online and in person. For those online, just a reminder that the Dharma Ask, I put that in the chat, and for those here, of course, we know the drill. We have the baskets. We ask for Dana for your kind donations to support the organisation so that we can keep going. You said 13 years. Is that about right? something in that area, and we've been through a few ups and downs through that time with premises and changes beyond our control, and yet one way or another we've continued. And in order to continue into the future, each of us, I'm sure we'll do our part in maintaining this straightforward and perhaps deceptively simple practice of meditation. Often it's a curious thing, but in life, that which is very, very simple is often difficult to achieve in many different areas of life. Something very, very simple can be difficult for us as human beings. I'm going to bring in a koan from the Zen tradition, always a good source of talking points. Hopefully it will address something in our practice of meditation. If it feels a little abstract or sounds a bit obscure, please bear in mind I think it was written in about 1262 or something in that era, so some of the metaphors and the language, even translated to modern English, can seem a little different, but there's a reason that this traditional record has managed to be preserved for so long. Very fortunate in Buddhism, in the Dharma world, for the Buddhism that came through, in this case, China and then Japan, is in those cultures they were fastidious record keepers, very good at maintaining records. I was reading time about they were looking at tsunami risk in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know, you may know there's like a major fault line off that area, and they were looking at the forests in Oregon, and they discovered that must have been a major earthquake and a tsunami that had come like many miles inland. Must have been hugely devastating. It was in the record of the trees. They could see it in the trees, and they dated it approximately, and they were trying to find evidence. And then some bright spark thought, well, wow, this would have been, and I'm give or take 100 years here, so this would have been like 1150 or something. It's like 1,000 years ago, give or take. However, they also would have experienced this in Japan and China, so they went there, and sure enough, it's written up in several places that there's a fishing villages were devastated, and there'd been a tsunami going the other way as well in Japan, and they called it it was translated as a ghost tsunami because they didn't feel the earthquake. They just felt they just had the wave, but it correlated what had happened, so long before records were being preserved in that kind of form in the United States. It had been a long tradition in the East. Around the time, again, with many of these koans come down to us from. This one is from the Book of Equanimity. It's case 52, and for those we've sat together for some time and you've been kind enough to hear some talks of mine over the years, then this one might seem quite familiar. It's in my favorites folder of koans, and it's called Sozan's Dharmakaya, and so I'll read it. In fact, I'm going to read the preface and the main case. The preface says, I like this, says, preface to the assembly. So it's a tradition in Zen that has been an assembly, a group of people that come together to hear someone who has at least some, hopefully, a little bit of qualification in this area, being able to offer a talk. So you'd have an assembly of Dharma practitioners. Nice to see that tradition also still continues all of these years. It says, all knowledgeable persons are able to learn by parable and analogy. But when comparisons cannot be made, and it's impossible to find something similar or identical, how can it be expressed? So this is our preface. I think that's a fair opening. You know, we learn so much by parable and analogy, and by comparing something to something else. We could say, well, it's like this, and and make those approximations. But this case is going to deal with the reality in itself, the whole shebang. This experience, this curious mystery we've all been involved in, sharing this mystery all these many years, right? We didn't find out who'd done it yet, but we're all, right? We're all in the midst of that mystery, and it's difficult. We can't compare this reality to another. It's this life and this reality. You know, the forms within that may change, but the baseline thusness, the baseline life reality, can't be compared to something else. So it's difficult to describe. It's difficult to understand. But in the koan, they're going to make an attempt. So in the main case, a Zen teacher, Sozan, asked Josa, Buddha's true Dharmakaya is like the vast sky. Its conforming to things and manifesting shapes is like the moon in the water. How can this principle of conforming be expressed? Josa said, it's like the donkey seeing the well. Sozan remarked, well said, but that's only 80% of it. Josa rejoined, how about you, Osho, or teacher? Sozan replied, the well sees the donkey. Okay, well, I forewarned you that some of these terms might feel a little abstract, donkeys and wells here. But from the top, so we have a Sozan, a Zen teacher, asking Josa, Buddha's true Dharmakaya is like the vast sky. So in the philosophy of the way Buddhism is understood in the Mahayana, there are different reality bodies, and the Dharmakaya is the formless body of the Buddha, the formless body of reality. So it is like ultimate reality that can't be conceived of. Ultimate reality that can't be conceptualized. Right? The source of the world, the source of the universe, like where all of this comes from, if it comes from anywhere. Where it all goes to, if it goes to anywhere. What is that ultimate truth of reality which we, as human beings, we are and we're experiencing, but we can't grasp with knowledge and knowledge. We can project meaning onto it. We can find out how things work, but we find out how things work in a relative sense, right? But the ultimate reality of what this world and what this life is not something that we can grasp. This is what's called in Buddhism the Dharmakaya. He says that Dharmakaya is like the vast sky. So it's like our first analogy. It's conforming to things and manifesting shapes is like the moon in water. In Zen, the moon in water is quite a common and a beautiful analogy for enlightenment of the world. Like in this case, the moon, the full moon, which is an extraordinary sight. Right? It's always an extraordinary sight. Very beautiful down here in the desert when you see the full moon in the sky, and it being in this case reflected in water. So you can imagine a still dark lake, which is pretty much invisible at night. right? We can't really see anything on the surface of the water, but then the rest of the world is being reflected in it. In this case, you know, the moon can be beautifully reflected in water. Back in these times during China, it was a popular aristocratic practice was to view the moon in the evening. So that was so in Japan too. You know, they'd have like tea ceremony and other things would be done around being out on a nice evening and being outside and moon viewing, right? This is way before Netflix, right? This is like, so moon viewing. But you know, if you can see that, I'm sure you have in your lives those times where, you know, maybe you go out in the early morning or it's late in the evening, you step outside and it's just you alone and the night sky of a beautiful sunset, or it's still cool and it's starting to get light, and you look out and you just see the wonder, you know, the extraordinary beauty of the world that we live in, that's all around us. So in this, Buddha's true Dharmakaya, Savasakaya, it conforms to things and manifest shapes. He asks, how could this principle then be expressed? You know, another way of just saying, what does that mean? Or how does that work? Or what's this about? You know, how can it be expressed? And Joseph said, it's like the donkey seeing the well is a curious metaphor. The donkey seeing the well. I'm just running through my mind, how do I tactfully describe us all as donkeys without insulting anybody? Let me try. Well, donkeys, you know, culturally donkeys often have, you know, something, is it fair to say they have some like kind of a negative reputation, or it's like a less than fancy reputation at least, you know, donkeys just have certain qualities which maybe we don't value so much. But donkeys also have great qualities which we do value. Like again, you know, we have some cultural translation here in this era in China. If you owned a donkey, for many people, you'd be quite wealthy. You'd be quite well off, certainly compared to somebody who didn't. Donkey or an animal in that sense can help you with an enormous amount of work to be able to, you know, to produce food. So a donkey has a much more of a mixed reputation here. But I think we could agree that donkeys are, certain things ascribed to donkeys, very stubborn. Stubborn and hard-working, right? So if we just take those two, stubborn and hard-working, persistent. Donkeys don't give up. Donkeys are persistent. You know, so some of these qualities we can start to pull out and maybe recognize them. Like for Dharma practitioners or for meditators, there is a certain healthy stubbornness required, and a healthy discipline and persistence that's required too. So when we came in today and we settled down, and then we have our a little shorter than usual, although I felt like, wow, 20 minutes turns out to be quite a long time, right? It's enough time to sit. Then what do we do during that time of meditation? How do we express that time? Like, what are we doing during that time? Like for many people, when we're learning meditation, we're making effort to still the mind a little bit. We're trying to let go of some stress. Often the hamster's running around on the wheel in our heads, and we would like to have a little respite and some peace to come along. But as we know, there's no volume switch that you can, you know, turn down in your own mind. It's a process of sitting with, again, some stubbornness or discipline, and allowing mind and body to fall back to and return to its basic calm. Right? It's very powerful to sit in a group because we can avail ourselves of each other's practice. Right? It's like all of the retreats I've ever done, I've realized that I would not do this if I was by myself. Right? It's like I would not sit all day if it was just me. I might start out that way, but with nobody looking and no support from anybody else, you know, probably quit. So you gain the support of the group and you're able to persist and to sit for a period of time. And we can go through those gates of letting go of extraneous thought, which is very important in meditation, very important in sitting. Usually in meditation we learn and we become adept with some concentration method. In whatever way we've come across meditation, we've probably learned some methods of concentration. A breath meditation technique or another technique to help to redirect attention away from the relentless thought stream and laundry list of things to do, and instead to let that fall aside and come back to what is real and apparent now. Yeah. And that can be difficult for us human beings because, like moon viewing, or when it's something very simple like sitting in a room, then what is happening now may not be so entertaining or compelling. Right? There's a reason why Netflix is so successful. It's easier to watch something or put something on, you know. And the world is always well, making a buck out of, like, you know, making entertainment and making these distractions. But so human beings, we have to go through that gate with meditation of not being attached to being entertained during this time, or finding something particularly interesting, another form of entertainment during this time. It is much more sitting and letting that preferential mind that seeks entertainment, prefers things it likes over things it doesn't, let that, not have that run us, but let that fall to one side. And this is much more now we start to look at the well, where it says the donkey sees the well. This well of the whole world, the Dharmakaya, this whole thing that we are. He uses this beautiful metaphor of well. We think about the qualities of a well. It's typically is where water is drawn from. Right, with staple, fundamental nourishment of life. Cultures throughout history, in the past and now, rely on wells. We still do. Rely on wells drilled into the ground so that we can find fresh water. I don't know if you've ever looked into a well in some place where there's a well and you get to. You see quite a lot of, where I'm from in the UK, there's a lot of, like, kind of historic preserved wells. I think probably much more kind of per capita than in the United States, you know. It's like old historic wells, and people will visit them. And there's the old custom sometimes of throwing a coin in, saying a prayer or making a wish. In modern times, all the wells have signs that say, please don't throw coins. And you still see that in places around. There have been places around. They have that at, I think it's at Sunnylands, where they have a beautiful little park at Sunnylands you can walk around, and they have the water thing. And it's like, please don't throw any coins in here. It's bad. And it could, you know, koi ponds are the same because it can kind of poison the fish. So a well is something that we can really receive nourishment from, receive water from. But when you look into a well in this setup, you can't see usually they're dark and you can't see the bottom. You know, at the Zen Center we have these wells that are drilled into the granite face of a mountain, horizontal wells. that bring the, it's wonderful water, and it comes filtered through the granite of the mountain. So apparently they go in there about 100 feet, the drill hole in the pipe, right into this granite. And you can't see it, obviously, right? It's just all you see is like where the pipe comes out. You can't see into the well. In the same way, the point that I'm trying to make is, in meditation, when you look at life just directly, then like a deep dark well, you can't see where all of this comes from. It just is. You just see what's on the surface. Right? You look into life, like, what is this life? What is this reality? You don't see beyond this direct experience, right? We can project ideas, but we just look at, it's like the moon reflected in water. You just see the forms of the world. Now, as human beings, we have a lot of preference and attachment and aversion. The Buddha taught extensively about the way that we prefer content over other content. We like good things to happen. We don't want bad things to happen. It's a very natural human way. It's natural for donkeys, natural for humans. It's natural for all things. And yet, with that kind of preferential mind, the preferential mind in the world that we have is also a source of dukkha. Right? That's that word which was kind of somewhat erroneously translated as suffering. The Buddha said life is suffering. Apparently that's not a great translation. Another translation would be dissatisfactoriness or unsatisfactoriness. Or, as I heard recently from somebody who just became a Zen teacher and grew up speaking Nepalese, and the language is very close, he said if he translated it, dukkha would mean, it's not going my way. That really nails it. Dukkha, the Buddha said, it's not going my way. That nails it as a human being, right? So we have that preferential mind. Life isn't going our way. I'm glad we can laugh about it, but sometimes we cry about it too, right? It's like, it's very difficult truth. But so meditation, though, in this sense, is gaining respite and seeking refuge and seeing beyond that filter of being attached to preference, always being attached to preference, and always being on that samsaric wheel where life is, running us based on our preferences. This didn't go my way, now I'm upset. This did go my way, now I'm happy and I want it to continue going my way. And of course, around and around we go, many times, even during one day. But our practice, our meditation, is to just sit and see the well. Look and experience, like that. Although I tend to lead the meditation the same way each time and say the same things, and perhaps you're like, oh my gosh, here he goes again with his same meditation technique. But I've found it over the years to be vitally important to arrange the body, arrange the mind, commit to sitting, and then apply the wonderful shift, which is have no regard or preference for what is being experienced. Internally, how we're feeling, what's going on in the mind, what thoughts are bouncing around in there. And then externally, whether it feels a little bit too cold, a bit too hot, somebody left their phone on, someone coming in late, all of these little things that you hear and see, which can catch us in our preferential mind and say, oh man, I was having such a good meditation until that happened. Right? But really, Zen meditation is completely as this is, internally, internal world, and external world, radically accepted and allowed to be thus. It's practice of true inclusivity. It's like, let everything be as is. Which we find is, and maybe like this is a good stepping stone that when we sit together, we can do that. When we leave and get in our cars and go out into the world, then we get tested. Can we do that? But meditation as a practice builds that muscle memory, and it builds that basis where, yes, you can more and more find an equanimity of mind, find that place of peace, of non-preferring, and apply it as a salve when out in the world and conditions are stirring everything around. Always coming back to that refuge of, it is exactly the way that it is. It is thus, and this is it. This is where words kind of break down, but this is the pure Buddha's Dharmakaya. It is exactly the way that it is. But when he says this, his teacher who'd asked him to express it said, that's well said, but that's only 80% of it. You know, it's kind of a nice way to criticize the statement. So, like, maybe, you know, it's like a very polite society. You know, it's like, well, that's very well said. However, you know, or 80%. What's that? A B? You scraped a B with 80%. That's only 80%. So he asks, how about you, Osho? And Osho just means it's like an honorific title for a teacher. You know, so okay, teacher. You know, how do you see it? And beautifully he turns it over and says, the well sees the donkey. Right, so we start with you, me, I, sitting, and we practice, and we experience the world. Experience the well. We look, we listen, we feel, we experience. Donkey sees the well. But here Sozan says, that's good. That's practice. That's most of it. But ultimately, when expressing this pure Dharmakaya, he says, the well sees the donkey. You know, how is this different? But this difference is the liberation and enlightenment of Buddhism. You know, the Buddha began as a person trying to find something out, trying to get enlightened, trying to address this truth in life which he found so deeply affecting and so disturbing, trying to get somewhere, trying to work it out. But ultimately it cannot be worked out satisfactorily. It can't be. Something has to change. And all of those years ago, the Buddha was sat in the the plains of northern India after great depth of practice, and ultimately great failure to emancipate, to find a way out of suffering. Great failure. Close to death, decides to just sit. To just return to meditation. Not with any method. He'd practiced all the methods and learned all of the methods at that point. You know, not in order to gain anything. He'd had everything, but he lost everything already. Just one person sat on the ground with a deep conviction to not move until his questions were resolved. That which drove him was resolved. And it's said that after 7 days of long effort, he opened his eyes and saw the morning star Venus hanging in the sky. And is awakened. And that's where this whole long Buddhist tradition emanates from, that, what we call that awakening, or that enlightenment. Now, of course, Venus is like, I'm not sure how you see it down near the mountains. If you have it like at Yokoji, at the Zen Center, you see it most nights. It's like very bright in the sky. It's like one of the first stars that you see at night, really bright up there. So it's an extraordinary sight, and we see it all of the time. It never fails to impress, but it, I can't say that every time I see it, I have a deep enlightenment event. In a sense. So what is this that the Buddha realizes? And maybe I tie this to the context of this koan. The donkey sees the well, the Buddha sees the morning star. Nothing special happens. The morning star sees the Buddha. Something different occurs. The well sees the donkey. And it's like as the donkey sees the well, maybe or when we sit, we discover that there is nothing to know, ultimately. There's nothing that, it can't be known, it can't be understood. There's nothing to discover, or there's nothing there to know. Knowing meets its event horizon. But when the well sees the donkey, now there's no one to know it. That goes further. Not only no one you can't know it, but no knower to know. No division between what you are and the world. No duality, no separation. This is drilling down into the Dharmakaya, the very fabric of reality. We take it, the way that we're wired, the way that we're organized, as these curious, smart apes walking around the world, We have that fact of separation. We're different. We're all a little different. But everything on this earth, everything in this world, shares a common root. Is a part of this unknowable, vast, inexplicable wholeness of reality. What does that mean? Don't know. Don't know. But do we need to know? When the Buddha reached the end of finding out what could be known, to actually arrive at the point of not knowing, of real not knowing, to go beyond that duality of himself and the morning star and himself and the world, the wonderful irony is that is gloriously liberating. This I, me, self, this human condition, we are subject to dukkha. We are subject to, it's not going my way. That's just an indelible human quality. But that's fine. There can be two things going on here. A human being, immersed always in the human condition, with preferences, with ups and downs, subject to impermanence, doing our very best in life, doing our very best in the world, as flawed as that is sometimes. That's one side. But the other side, you're also a Buddha. One who is awake and aware, liberated, enlightened, and has no problem. You're also that one. And our practice, our meditation, is nourishing the Buddha, that baby Buddha inside you, the one who knows this, deep in your heart. You are also that. That is the one we nourish in meditation and in practice. And then we temper the difficulties and the vagaries of our human condition. Doing the least harm possible, relieving as much dukkha or dissatisfaction as possible, and leaning into expressing and helping and doing as much good as possible. The work of practice as a human being, resting on the principle of Buddha or awakening that you also are, both the well and the donkey, and all of it all together. And and I'll put the talk there. I thank you for listening. We have a few minutes if we have any question or comment. Again, as I said at the beginning, I'm sorry I have to go a little early, so I just have about 5 minutes, and then I'll hand over to Terence to have the closing sit. But and I'm sorry, but with Zoom that would end then, because I'm not going to give him my laptop. I'm very attached to it. But in the 5 minutes or so now, does anyone have any question, any thoughts about what I'm raising here? And that's so for online. Okay, my friends, I appreciate it. I'm gonna have to finish at that point, but thank you for your kind ears and your attention, and again for being here. And yeah, enjoyed it. Really look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks
Thank
everybody on Zoom. I appreciate it.